of the Keshe Foundation Canada, and I've been with the Keshe Foundation for several years, and I started the Knowledge Seekers workshops with Mr. Keshe. Actually, it was his idea to start the Knowledge Seekers workshops, but it was based on the plasma reactor group that I have every Tuesday night. I started almost 4 years ago now. And I just got really interested in the Keshe technology after following various alternative energy sources like Nikola Tesla and various others, but never being satisfied with what I was seeing. And from the very first video from Mr. Keshe, I was satisfied. I was interested. I wanted to know more. I finally got the answer to what is an electron and how the universe works, and theories about this anti-gravity kind of idea and so on. And all of that came together through this Keshe technology. And now we see it being used in very much hands-on stuff every day. I think it's just fantastic, and the kind of situation where you find yourselves getting together in a group to learn about this, this new science. And it is an incredible process, and I'm really supportive of all this workshop orientation of, it's a grassroots movement then. It's hands-on, it's knowledge that's right in front of you that you can see and work with. It's not airy-fairy stuff, although some of the theories get way out there and it stretches your mind as much as it'll go until it nearly snaps and might even. But it is this science is based on truth, the way I see it, and truth in the true sense of what rings that bell of truth deep inside of you. And if that rings with this teaching, then you will find that you will have an amazing amount of knowledge and information that will just rush in, and it can be overwhelming, but on the other hand, it can be very invigorating and will lead to a whole new culture that we can create ourselves, that's based on peace and based on a new kind of technology that's ancient but modern. Anyway, I'll let Vivk say some more. I didn't mean to diverge into all that. I was supposed to talk about myself a bit more, perhaps. But is there any questions? Maybe someone has something that they want to ask immediately. Maybe I can just answer about something that pops up.
Rick Crammond. Crammond? Yeah, he's the guy who does most of the videoing for the.
Right, I host the online workshops for Mr. Keshe, and I do other jobs for the Keshe Foundation, so online and whatnot.
Do you guys want to jump in with questions, or go ahead? Can you hear us, Vivk? Can you just do a quick intro?
Okay, my name is Vivk. I'm from Singapore, and I do technical support and manufacturer support for Keshe Foundation. And you know, Rick has actually said everything that needs to be said. Some of you may have noticed that I was using a portable nebulizer just now. I mean, that's a real-life practical application of the technology. I was nebulizing myself with the plasma water of CO2 GANS because I was feeling very tight in the chest and very wheezy, couldn't breathe as well. Just a few minutes with that nebulizer, it loosened all the phlegm, took it into the stomach, let the stomach acids deal with it, and now I'm feeling so much better. So that's where we're coming from with respect to plasma technology. It's real-life application. It's things that people can do in their own basement, their own garage, and everyone at home can benefit from it. So we're happy to be here today, and we look forward to receiving your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Vivk. Do you guys want to jump in and ask questions and just introduce yourselves as you do, or you want to each go around and just say who you are and what your kind of expertise or your interests is? Questions? Okay, go ahead. Somebody jump in with a question and just introduce yourself as you do.
You jumping? Okay. Is that you? You were saying questions? Got one already?
Hello. My name's Andrew Murray. I have a question regarding, as you were saying, let's say regarding the biological effects of the CO2 GANS or GANS. I want to get more clear about the actual biochemical processes that are taking place in these, or what comes out of this. I'm just interested on the technical side and the manufacturing side of things. Knowing the process of, you get different things online of how you produce these GANs or GANs, and
we're going to be teaching that tomorrow.
you're going to be teaching that tomorrow,
How to
right?
make GANs and how to put, if you want to ask them about what it's made up of.
Oh, right. More on the regards of the effects. Seeing things ranging from people making pads that they put on themselves and it kind of acts as like a heat pad, kind of thing like this, to ingesting it, to having it help plants produce, quicker response, all these effects. I'm interested if there's been any negative effects that have been recorded yet in ingesting too much, or is there an overdose? What is the hysteresis effect, basically, of this? Is there a hysteresis effect to GANS technology? Is there too much?
Well, absolutely, you can have too much. For example, the copper oxide GANS is not something you'd want to ingest directly, and you would not want to use it, for your aquarium or something like that, because it will basically kill fish and other living organisms if it's used in high concentration, the same as any copper product will if you put it in soil, and so on. It's copper is often used as an insecticide in certain forms, right? So, but on the other hand, copper is essential to our bodily processes, and it's one of the basic elements that are used in the body compared to many synthetic things or other heavier elements and so on that are not used in the body. So, as everything, including water is fine in small concentrations, but tell it to the person that's drowning in the ocean whether water is harmless. It's not harmless when ingested in too much of a concentration. Same with salt water. If you drink too much of it, you'll be in trouble. But if you dilute that salt water, say 3 to 1 to 10 to 1 in that ratio, then you can actually survive on salt water, and it's beneficial for you. You can actually give salt water to a plant, for example, as long as it's diluted salt water. If you give straight salt water to a plant, it'll kill it almost immediately. And that's how many armies have eradicated their enemies, by salting their lands. So it's a case of a little bit is good and too much is not good, as in almost every substance that we take in. Any pharmaceutical drug, if you have the right amount, it may or may not have the correct effect. But definitely if you take too much, it could harm, or in a lot of cases kill you. So in the case of, for example, this CO2 GANS, which is the most common, the one that's talked about a lot in the Keshe Foundation and so on, I have not personally seen anyone that's overdone it, or heard of any cases of people who have overdone it with that CO2 GANS, even when it was ingested directly, which is not recommended. It's not recommended to ingest any of the GANSes themselves. The idea is you can learn to drink the GANS water, but not the GANS itself. That's the big distinction. And the GANS water, or what's called plasma water, is essentially the water, the distilled water that's taken off the top of the material of this substance, this liquid. The GANS itself settles out at the bottom. You can see Vivk there. If you can, if we could highlight his video there, you'd be able to see his picture. Cary, if you were able to.
Yeah, we have, Rick, we've got GANS in the room here we're putting out on the table too.
Right. Right. So you can
This
see
guy missed your
GANS,
talk last night, so yeah.
basically the GANS sits on the bottom and the GANS water is on the top. And so you extract that GANS water and you can put that as drops into drinking water and a certain ratios and so on for health effects and that sort of thing. But the GANS is not to be ingested directly. There are experiments going on, and with it ingesting and actually injecting into the bloodstream GANS products.
Those are actually, Rick, like clinical studies, right?
Clinical studies. This is for people that are terminal cancer patients who have the regular medical profession has totally given up on them, and it's they're not expected to live and so on, but they're doing trials with direct injection into their arteries with GANS products to see if they can recover from a bad situation, essentially. So suffice to say that the GANS products are used in different ways. Ingestion of the liquid is only, and the health benefits is only one aspect of the GANS. The GANS is also used for power supplies and in the space systems and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different, it's a multi-spectrum substance, and it's part of the, it's only part of the whole picture, of course. There's creation of nanomaterials before you get the GANS. That's a whole art and science in itself. And then once you have the GANS, how do you go from the GANS and extract that energy out of it and so on? That's the trick, and the whole trick with nanotechnology and so on now is how do we manage it? How do we, like I'm been spending a lot of time lately to create sensors. How do we sense the GANS? How do we tell a difference between different GANSs in a way that we can either see or hear or otherwise interact with, besides our own sensing? I mean, there's people that are sensitive to the GANS. They can feel it. They can feel the life energy with it, and they can tell you on a scale of 1 to 50,000 how strong it is and this kind of thing. Others don't necessarily feel that way. They might see effects, they might sense other things, they might have other ways, but I like to have something a little more objective. For example, something that changes sound, and I have devices that I've rigged up with inside of GANS, inside of a test tube. It's my electric test tube, I call it. It's got a wire that goes into an audio plug and this little sensor that's inside there, and I put that inside the tube of GANS, and I can actually tune it in with my software and listen to the sound of that through a radio circuitry. And that's what I've been showing in my plasma reactor group on Tuesdays, and also I do private teachings on the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute online teachings, which you can access for €100 a year. You have access to 5 days of teaching a week, plus all the previous videos for the online private teachings, where there's over 27 teachers now in various languages and so on.
Hey, Rick.
And it's a lot of information available. Yes.
We've got about 15 people here, so maybe we can kind of jump from question to question, because we've only got this room for so long, about another hour and a half, and I have a feeling we could probably go on for hours.
I can, unless my jaws get flapping, they can go for a long time. Yes.
Yeah, I just like to tell the gentleman who asked, we can give you those links too, because there's so much teaching online, and these ongoing discussions are happening all the time, and they're really great to jump into and just become part of, because then you'll start assimilating in your own way, be able to make better choices about the details.
I'd just like to add a very quick point about the plasma itself. I've been running an experiment over here to try to purposely overdose on plasma water, and I've been running that for a month and it has not happened. Now, we have to come back to what Mr. Keshe says with respect to the plasma. The way that the plasma energy interacts with the body is that your body will take what it needs and let go of what it doesn't need. So in my experience so far, I have not been able to overdose on the CO2 water. And I also have some copper oxide water in there, but we have to play with the ratios. Obviously, you can't, it's not good to just drink pure copper oxide water because of its properties. It needs to be tempered, it needs to be balanced. So what we do with the plasma waters is that we balance the energies in such a way that it becomes beneficial to the body.
Thanks, Vivek.
Welcome.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in. My name is Justin. I work here with several of these gentlemen in a company that develops non-thermal plasma devices. And I wasn't here for the presentation yesterday, so I'm kind of coming in cold. And I know that there's a certain amount of time, maybe 90 to 120 minutes more we could expect here. I'm curious if there was a specific structure that was planned for the time that we have here today about what information we'll cover. If this is an open session, just popcorn off whatever questions come up. Okay, excellent. That helps me understand what's going on
Do
here.
you work with the guy that was here last night, or no?
I'm not sure who the guy was here last night.
The guy that was asking all the questions, that had a meeting today. Tanasi.
Yeah, we've worked with Tanasi for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks. That helps clarify what it is and what it isn't here. Great.
Because we did a slideshow last night for a couple of hours, kind of showing the expanse of the technology.
Mhm.
And then tomorrow night, we're doing how to do the nano-coating and the GANS and the health pens and health pads and how to make coils for power units. So all that's available here, but some of the people were asking questions, and we had talked to Jerry earlier about getting on with a couple of the tech guys so that some of the questions that maybe they can answer a little more in depth than Whitney and I could, or we might be able to, but sometimes it's just nice to have, these guys have a pretty wide expanse of knowledge because they've been immersed in it day in, day out for the last few years. So whatever you want to ask. He was asking great questions last night that I couldn't answer. And I'd love for you guys to ask some of those more complex technical questions or medical or whatever.
Hi there, my name's Jerry, and I'm wondering about the signature of the different minerals and elements that you're using for the plasma. What is the signature of copper compared to magnesium, compared to CO2? I'm certain that they must have specific application. And it seemed last night from the discussion, one was being substituted for another. But what I saw last night during the experiment is that the plasma water made from copper produces a different magnetic field than the others. So what does that signature look like, and how can we use that in terms of helpful technology, in terms of the soil, agriculture, and then the human body in terms of healing?
Yeah, and let me just jump in a minute. I don't know how they're hearing me, but can you guys hear me? Vivek and Rick?
It's a little low, but it's okay, yes.
Yeah, just to say, Lauren, I want you to know that those guys have your video and they were watching it before we got together. And I don't want to completely jump into that right now because that discussion could go on for a couple hours pretty easily. I'd like to get a bunch of different questions, but we will get to that and we will talk about it. And so Rick and Vivek, just so you know, we did do a little experiment with the compass because we started talking about that last night. So we were talking about this experimenting Lauren was doing, and that's kind of what Jerry's asking about, what I think initiated a little bit of that signature question, right?
Right. This is actually something I've been working with in the last few weeks especially, is to try to find out what is the signature of the CO2 GANs and the copper oxide GANs and the CH3 GANs, the three main GANSs that are used by the Keshe Foundation. and other people that are experimenting in this plasma realm, this plasma science. And so essentially, what is it that we're trying to measure with this material? Obviously it's something different than just simply an electromagnetic field in terms of a radio field or a normal magnetic field. And so how can we measure? How can we develop the tools to measure this substance? Excuse me. For example, I've got something here. This is a ping pong ball, and it's filled with GANS. It's got CO2 GANS inside of it. So how do we measure some sort of objective way what that is? And so, I mean, we have people that could sense perhaps the fields given off by the GANS plasma water. But I'm trying to find some way to actually measure it. So what I've come up with is basically, I call it the electric ping pong ball. And it's actually an electric GANS ball in a way. And it's got an input here that I actually put Vivk, I think you need to mute your video or your audio.
Okay.
And so what I can do is actually plug in an 1/8" phono plug into it. And I plug that into my computer through a little preamp thing called an iRig. And I run it through sound software. And I can actually listen to the sounds of this GANS ball. What I've got is there's a little wire that goes from the main central electrode on your audio plug. And it goes into a piece of wire that's stuck inside the middle of the GANS ball. So essentially, it's like an electrode that goes inside the middle of the ball, and it's all nano-coated wire. It's many fibers of black nano-coated copper wire, and one of those fibers only goes to the little electrode there. So it becomes like a sensitive detector, and it can detect the fields around it and so on. Maybe I could try to actually demonstrate that just briefly if you want, just to get the sound from it. So it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. I'm not sure if this will come through properly, but let's try it anyway here just quickly. Oh, it's not. Yes, hello.
So,
I think that we do want Lauren to talk about, sorry, louder. We want Lauren to talk about what he's found with his compass. I think we're all in the same question right now.
Right, okay, that would be good.
Maybe we can do it right in front of the screen and bend the computer screen to look at it. If we do it right in front of here, and then everybody will see it on the.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to work.
no, you don't want to. If you don't want to, it's okay. And we have it on his name's Rick.
Rick, we're on the same page. I noticed Lauren Edward Weedland, graduate research at Cal Poly, and I'm in the lab extracts throughout the world and the universities for my research. This particular research.
Sorry, could you turn the video camera so we can see the person talking there? Great, thank you. Hi.
Hi. Yes, so I just wanted to make a chimed in comment here that from my work that I do, I just made a little conclusion here. Ways to measure and identify the differences and spectrum of characteristics that lead to scientific lab extracts. I don't know how many scientists there are in here, but lab
I think you're probably a scientist of one kind or another.
I'm talking about university scientists.
Yeah, well,
We all share the data, regardless of what country. And that's, in my opinion, can go. Another place is scientific lab extract. I can do that. Of course, I'm preparing that right now. I have the rough notes of what I found from iron, zinc, CO2, and also some other GANs that I checked out. Some very interesting and scientifically duplicatable observation. I would like to duplicate it several times, of course, and video it. We have some video coverage now, but for university level lab extracts, we'll polish that up and get it submitted at the university.
Can you give us a synopsis of what you've done?
It's in the video too, but let me just look at my notes. I could give you a little history also.
Yeah, we'd like everybody to have a chance, so.
The observer and common sense scientist I am, and technologist, etc. I thought I would check a few things out. I brought my ohm meter and microvolt meter and my compass, and I started looking at the different attractions and spins that the different GANs were having with my needle on my compass. So I thought I would do an experiment with iron, and the conclusion showed that iron has a counterclockwise 90-degree permanent imprint effect upon metal, the metal cap on the mason jar. Once it's imprinted, it doesn't go away. So far, I've checked it over 24 hours. It just stays that way. You can put the compass down there and rotate the little cap around. The compass stays right there. And now you'd say, well, it's metal, it's holding it there. No, it's not. I've done it over and over. I brought the compass into the field, watched it interact with the metal, and then set it down in the metal with all of the elements, and then logged their particular characteristics going in and out of the field. So iron is 90 degrees clockwise, and
Yeah, they were reproducing that last night, Lauren.
Pardon?
They were reproducing it last night. We told them about it.
Okay.
now was that the iron GANs, pardon me, was that the iron GANs or the iron GANs water? Is that what you're talking about?
GANs and the water, both in the jar.
In the
Okay.
jar, you can take the lid off of the jar and set it down as long as it's marked north. And of course, you can check the water itself. There's nothing there. There's no charge whatsoever. Of course, the lid is metal. It picked up the charge. And that's the remarkable discovery that I made, is that each element has its own particular imprint. Zinc, for instance, it keeps the exact gravitational as the Earth. It does not change north, so far in my experience. And the imprint that it makes is the same as the Earth.
So, Lauren, what I'm wondering is, what other ways are we measuring the characteristics, the signature of GANs, of the different GANs? This is one thing that was demonstrated. What other things have you been utilizing in terms of tracking the signature of the different GANs elements?
Did you hear that, Rick?
We could barely hear it. I think are you asking what are the ways it's been used, or what are the ways we can measure it?
In terms of the diagnostics and measurements, what other means are you using, or has this team utilized in terms of measuring the signature of the different GANs? What I witnessed last night was there's a lot of input coming in. For example, an analogy with medical marijuana. There is so much information coming in from anecdotal uses all over the world that we're really able to figure out a signature of its application with different medical conditions. Do we have this kind of input coming in with the different GANS elements such that we're really able to develop identify a signature just because so many people are doing their research in different things like ping pong balls and listening and magnetics and the whole thing? What kind of database have we been able to accumulate that's giving us a lot more information on the utilization and the opportunity for utilization?
Well, okay, that's a little different question, and I was looking at more technically in terms of how do we measure the actual effects with the GANs and sort of in some objective way. But in terms of the way people have been interacting with the GANs, and we get, for example, testimonials, dozens and dozens of testimonials come in from people who are using, for example, the health pads, just as one small example. It's not small in its effect, but it's small in terms of the big picture of the total uses of GANSs. But these very simple health pads that you can make virtually overnight or less, you can make them in a few minutes once you have your GANS material already to go. You've got it there in front of you on the table. You could actually be making these health pads as we speak. And people have had amazing results with them. I'm sure Vivk could also share many stories that he's heard of and has been in touch with, and personally as well. And myself, for example, I'll give you one clear-cut example. A couple of years ago, we were told by Mr. Keshe, treat these GANS materials very carefully, never touch them, you always use gloves and so on, because the fields are so potent, so powerful. So we treat them with a great deal of respect and so on. But then as the information got out, people started doing stuff with them and started ingesting the GANs and experimenting and so on. So I got brave one day because I have a skin condition where my skin will occasionally break out in itchy bumps and so on. Basically, I'm hypersensitive to environmental and so on, and just a drop of oil or a smear of grease on my hand will cause me to bleed from my hands, because I've been a mechanic for 40 years and I just I can't do that sort of thing anymore. So anyways, I had an outbreak on my arm of these these incredible itchy bumps. I know from experience that I can't just put anything on. All of the health creams, all the different things, all the home remedies, nothing works. Everything irritates the skin and just makes it worse. And it's like, ah! And so I've learned just to use a couple of different things that I sort of trust. And I decided one day to get really brave and actually just apply some of this CO2 GANS right onto my skin, just to see if it was going to, if it's going to irritate, I'll know right away, and I'll just keep away from it. And if it's going to help, then I'll know right away. So I put it on, and it was the most cooling. It took away all the irritation. It just made it dried up all the the sort of irritated areas, and it was the most amazing healing properties that basically I've ever experienced in a substance. And I don't recommend people to put the GANS material directly on their skin. You are to use the GANS water and so on. But there are those who have experimented with that and have had some amazing results. I just got a testimonial come in yesterday for someone that burned themselves with this. They had a torch and they accidentally burned their skin, had a big bubble on the skin. It was that much of a burn. And what they did is they immediately put the health pad on and put a plastic pain pad and put the plastic glove over the whole situation. Within 2 hours, the skin was completely healed. There was no more blister, and the skin was healed. This is the kind of things that we hear about through the use of this this material. There's one person that's that's claimed to heal their problems with well, various things. There's what do you call it? Oh, I forget the name of the medical condition that was healed recently with that. There's virtually an unlimited number of uses medically that have been reported for this, and it's okay if you have an occasional reporting. That's random. You could call that random, but we get regular, repeated things, and we are accumulating now a database, like you're talking about, with the actual effects versus what dosages were used and so on, to come up with some regularity in the use and variety of uses too. Of this.
Could I follow up on that?
Pardon me?
Could I interject and follow up on that right there? So I'm interested if you could point us in the direction of, and maybe it's just me, maybe I need to get caught up to speed, but anything, you just mentioned a database. You mentioned that you're collecting some data. I appreciate the value of testimonials, and I appreciate the value of people's direct experience, and yet data-driven results that we can see replicable by using the same methodology is really important too. And I'm curious as to where and who currently is working with your technology, whether for a medical application or for an energy generating application, or for some of the environmental clean remediation applications you spoke to, that is doing work generating data that is accessible for us to view, third-party view outside. What are the methods that are being used? Where's the data at? And how can we access that? That would be really,
Okay, I would like to very quickly jump in here because I need to run in a couple of minutes to address this question. What I'll do is, just before I leave, I will drop a link in the chat to an index of all our previous Knowledge Seekers workshop. Now, on some of these Knowledge Seekers workshop, you can find information on how the GANS was used for environmental remediation.
if we could get the
Okay.
audio back.
Your audio is cutting out a little bit.
Hello?
Yep.
It's okay at
Can you
this
hear me?
point, so.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So what I'll do just before I leave, I'll drop a link in the chat with an index of all the previous Knowledge Seekers workshop. And you can go through that index and find workshops where scientists actually use the GANS for environmental remediation in Ghana, for example, where they took samples of river water and put various GANSes in them and then tested the outcomes of that. You can also find in there how the GANS was used for agricultural uses. This was done, if I'm not mistaken, in Kenya by a doctor over there who planted potatoes, and they took a look at the differences. Someone in Australia also worked with the GANS in agriculture, and they showed some results.
And Mexico and China and actually several other countries too.
Several other countries. In China, for example, they show the example of growing vegetables in the dead of winter, where all other vegetables would literally freeze to death. These vegetables were growing very, very healthily. So as a very broad overview, what we have found with the GANSes, we can identify certain characteristics of each GANS. For example, the CO2 helps to correct any physical imbalances, which is why it is so good for fighting disease within the body, which is why it's so good for pain relief as well. If you have a headache, drink the CO2 water, and within a few minutes you start feeling the relief. Copper oxide is a very, very good disinfectant. It's a very good fungicide. It's also a very good insect repellent. So is the CO2. zinc oxide provides the connection with the emotion. So you get that emotional balance where CO2 gives you the balance physical, zinc oxide gives you that balance emotionally. And then finally, CH3 is it's the sugar of life. It's the basic sugar. So it is an energy giver. And we have found that it provides energy not just for human beings, but also for plants, even in cars as well, where CH3 is being used, the car starts to run a little bit stronger. So that's the broad overview that I would like to share with all of you right now. I have to leave right now, but I'm going to drop the link in the chat before I leave. Cary, if you could pass it on to everyone over here, that would be really very helpful. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it, and I hope to catch up with you all very soon. Take care.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks, Vivek. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So just to recap, if I understood that correctly, there's references to other outside researchers who are doing their own experiments, and those can be perhaps accessed in these previous knowledge seeker workshops, the records of that. Is the Keshe Foundation currently doing anything to archive or organize a record or database of other people outside researchers? Is there an effort to consolidate all of the information or whatever information there is in terms of other people's work? Since it sounds like the Keshe Foundation is not actively doing that themselves.
There's actually a number of things going on simultaneously. It's such a vast amount of information in so many different realms that it's a little hard to nail down in a way. We could probably use a logistics person to work full time in that regard. But there are things going on. For example, there are medical teachings for doctors with the data in the private online teachings of the Keshe Foundation. Each week there's a specific teaching for doctors that come on with their results about their health units that they create and the health helmets and all these different devices and the uses of GANSs and all that kind of thing is covered under the medical teaching for doctors. And if you're an alternative doctor, you can also be accepted for that program as well. So that's specifically for those that are the professionals. And they deal with, recording their information and it's in various realms. Like I say, there's even in the medical teaching, there's many categories of teaching in that way, and we're still coming up with ways to measure. How do you measure the results of this health unit that has these copper coils? It's got no batteries and no power on it, and it's got copper coils on these plates or shields kind of on each side, and you stand in between it and you get healed from the fields that we can't accurately measure with the instruments we have now. But yet when someone gets inside that device, they'll immediately say, I can feel the fields. Okay, so, and I can feel the healing that occurs after being in this device and so on. So we can feel it, yet we don't have a way to measure it. For example, if you just, from where you're sitting right now, if you were to feel the person beside you, you would get a definite impression of some sort.
Rick.
I guarantee you, there's no instruments that you could use that could define that impression, that
Rick,
could give you that result. Go ahead, sir.
yeah, and and it's even beyond just feeling. We spent a bunch of time with Dr. Rodrigo, who's on the medical team up in Washington. We spent about a week with him, and he told us, it's not just what you feel, but it is people getting these amazing healings. So from cancer being gone, from dogs and people, and in a relatively short order, a little boy recovering hearing that's been gone since 17 months. So it's more than just feeling, but again, I think like you said, there are not in our current systems a lot of ways to measure this data. And I know some of you guys, what you were talking about the other night, maybe some of you know ways to measure it that that would be helpful. Yeah, and Lauren has ways to measure it. I think hopefully new people will come forward. Can we hear that, what you're talking about there?
Sure, why don't you turn the video on so I can show it to people. You can spotlight the video.
Okay, well, the video's on.
I'm not, I think I'm just on the, maybe it's spotlighted on the group rather than on me. If you spotlight.
Okay, I'll just put it on gallery view, basically, is what I usually keep it on anyway.
Well, you have to spotlight the.
If we put it on speaker,
okay, that works.
See you.
That works.
Like to see you.
That works, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the idea. Here's this little GANS ball. It's got GANS water inside and a little bit of GANS. You can actually maybe see a little bit on the bottom, sort of kicking around there, that dark spot. And I've got the electrode inside. So let's listen to what the GANS hears. What is its universe like? So let me turn this on here. Can you hear that? Okay, you hear a bit of noise. Okay. So let me move it over to the Magrav unit. We have a Keshe Magrav unit here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me turn it out. It's too much gain here and it'll overwhelm your speakers probably. So that's pretty cool. And I've got a plasma ball here that I play with recently. You can hear that kick on right away. This thing picks it up on. But what's interesting is there's a barrier around this plasma. There's a field around this plasma ball that when this plasma ball enters into it, it detects it. Let me show you. Like I can't hear anything out here. You hear that? That's the barrier between this plasma ball. There's a field all around this plasma ball. And when this plasma ball enters into it, there's a definite Coulomb barrier it goes through. Listen to it. There's another one in here. You can be right up next to it, and it's not that loud, but a few centimeters away. And then again out here. So there's two barrier fields around this plasma ball that's discoverable by this other plasma ball. I mean, you could probably do it with other electronic means and so on, but I thought that was interesting. It's kind of fun to work with, and I find it really exciting to play with stuff like that because I'm able now to hear what goes on inside of the plasma. I've got my test tube set up here in a rack and so on, and I've got my electric test tubes. I've got various sensors, nano-coated black copper wire, nano-coated copper coils inside with electric plug-in. I can listen to it. And this one, some of them have an actual crystal radio set up with the diode and so on attached to it. And I've got all these different ways now that I can try to access what the plasma or what the fields sound like. How can we interact with the fields? And, you know, when I bring this up besides a GANS ball, is it going to, you know, will there be a difference? You know, I didn't get too much of a response on that one, but some of the other ones might have more of a, or a different kind of response. A lot of it is how I set the tuning with this software and so on too. It's a very tricky thing to get just right and eliminate all the other interference and whatnot. So suffice to say that that is one way to try to discover, and it is a process of discovery, because we haven't really, as a species, been experimenting in that realm. I mean, people have dabbled with it since, you know, day one, basically. Tesla and Edison. Even Edison was developing a lot of his things so he could hear voices from the in the afterlife, in the ethereal realm. That's why he invented his recording devices. To get back to your question, though, you had the questions about how is this information being collated, how is it being processed, and so I mentioned the medical teaching as one means that you can access the actual data, the scientific data. Another way is like through the Knowledge Seekers workshops, but we're still trying to get them all easily accessible. There's so much information in each 4-hour workshop. There's 142 workshops now, and that's a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of topics, a lot of detailed information in spots. There's presentations that people have done from various countries. Like you mentioned, agriculture. There's probably at least 6 or 8 reports on specific growing of crops with usually with CO2 GANS or GANS water and that sort of thing, and the results of shorter crop season and reversal of effects of gene manipulation and that sort of thing. And so we've got medical, there's agricultural. Like I say, there are reports available in different realms there. There's also the energy realm that you mentioned, and that again gets into a lot of areas. We have the Magrav unit that you see here, for example, that's been produced by the Keshe Foundation, and it's a factory in Italy. It's also being produced in the USA right now, and it should be available fairly soon for public consumption. They already have thousands of units produced. They're waiting to get certification, UL certification, so that it can be released and approved by the authorities and so on. And that's should be done fairly quickly. And there's a lot of people who have built their own Magrav units, and we have reports, lots of reports on the savings in power, you know, one versus another. There's other videos available that show 2 of these Magrav units hooked up in tandem that shows a 90% reduction in the what the meter shows on input versus output. There's various demonstrations of these devices. We have the blueprint teachings, which have the actual blueprints for creating these devices, how to wind the coils, how to make the plasma capacitors, how to create the Magrav devices, how to make the health pens. All of that is in the blueprint teachings available on the Keshe Foundation website. Click on the blueprint button there, and you can be taken to both the people's homemade or replications of the Keshe Foundation power units are all there, and as well as the blueprints, actual, you know, more or less like a blueprint picture of the actual units and so on. So that is all being documented and is part of the process that we're going through in the last year or two, trying to get a handle on this massive amount of information and data of knowledge that has been brought out first by Mr. Keshe, but it's because it's spread out all over the world now with people trying things and using this and finding incredible results. And that's caused this massive reaction, and it's growing very rapidly, especially on the workshop level, on the grassroots level. But not just that, also on the scientific level. For example, they just finished a conference.
Rick, may I interject?
Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, my name's Garrett, and I also work with Plasma Technologies. And you several times said that that ball that you have in your hand has a plasma inside. And I'm curious, what is the basis for that statement?
Okay. Are you working with low temperature plasma, that kind of atmospheric pressure plasma, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay. So what causes plasma at atmospheric pressure?
What causes a plasma in atmospheric pressure? Well, there is a breakdown in air, depending on the type of gas that you got inside, and depending on how much voltage you have, you can split apart the relationship between an electron and an atom, and then that atom, the ion will go one direction, the electron will go another, and the electron, according to some theories, will create an avalanche, depending on the type of plasma that you have. If you have a dielectric in between the electrodes, that avalanche will then continue to excite other atoms and cleave other electrons and continue that process until you or the observer will see a photo effect, and light will emit from this reaction, right?
Right. So basically you're creating an ionized process, ionized gases, essentially, in that situation.
Ionization occurs.
Right. So what happens in a salt water solution is very much the same process. You have actually ions that immediately separate. Even in just plain water, you've got your H plus, OH minus ions that are, part of the being part of water, and even in a neutral pH. But if you increase the pH, you'll have more ions and more separation and so on occurring, and that so in water, essentially, it's like a vacuum process. You have a separation of the ions, as similar to what you just described in the room temperature, room pressure ionic process. But in the case of water, it's much easier because you already have that vacuum environment. There's no air in there other than some dissolved air in the water, perhaps. But it's in a vacuum environment, essentially. Like the water would be the same in a vacuum, or whether it's under pressure, more or less the processes that occur inside are similar. So what happens when you, in this saltwater environment where you're creating this GANS to start with, you have these plates in salt water, and it creates a process, and you have this precipitate that comes out of the CO2 GANS. And then by a process of getting rid of the salt water, by putting in distilled water and drawing it off and more distilled water, you do that 4 or 5 times until you just have distilled water and GANS. So then what you have is essentially your dielectric, which is distilled water, and you have the GANS, which is a concentrated hybrid of something between the nano, which the nano is already like, okay, if you look at the element copper and you have all these atoms, you know, tightly bunched in together. Then you have the nano-coating, this nano process, this black coating. It opens up, so the atoms are more opened up, but it's still a closed process. There's no air or other stuff in between. So it's opened up the structure and allowed for a plasmatic flow in between the atoms. And then you have that from the nano, you create the GANS from that layer. And the GANS is even more opened up. It's individual particles as such. You could call them Magrav fields, but they're individualized, but yet they've got elbow room. They can move around in this liquid, and they move like a cloud in that liquid. And so that gives them a range of motion, a range of movement that is one step further than the nanomaterial, which is one step further than the elemental material. So now you've got these concentrated, what have been described, little suns, this this GANS material, this GANS, CO2 GANS, let's say, this white cloudy stuff. And each one of those particles is like a little sun, but yet it's got a cap around it. It's not glowing or anything. It has to be in the right environment to show its qualities. So part of that environment is creating this GANS water. So the GANS itself imparts its fields into the distilled water. So that's what makes it a plasma water. Because it's distilled water, it can take the impression of whatever is around it, essentially, and it extracts or is able to exude the fields of this GANS material. So where it gets interesting is if you were to, for example, spin that material, I've got a thing set up here. This is this lab flask here, and whoops, my GANS balls fell out of the system. This is a rotating lab flask and 3 ping pong balls, and it's set up with a sewing machine motor, and that can be spun, and the GANS inside this flask will form a ring inside there. So what happens is the GANS material is separated through the rotating process. It goes to the outside of the globe. And then you have the center is the distilled water, and any lighter byproducts such as hydrogen or whatever would go to the center of this rotating apparatus. So that way you've used the aspect of the dielectric, and you use the aspect of creating a gradient between the actual GANS material and the center of this spherical thing. And in the Keshe technology, the center is always very, very important, because the center of any rotating or other, for example, a tetrahedral 4-ball kind of pyramid, the center of that is where the free plasma, what we call the free plasma, resides, which is the fields that are the resultant from the other fields. So in this case of a rotating, a GANS inside of a something that's a dielectric, essentially, you've created 2 poles separated by a dielectric. And even if it had salt in it, you still have the separation of the ions in the salt water. You'll have the heavy ion, for example, the OH would be a lot heavier than the H+. So your hydrogen will tend to orientate toward the center of the rotating spherical mass, and the heavier elements or ions will tend to separate to the outside. And again, you cause a separation, which is a gradient, which can create fields. And once fields are created by this and this and this, then you have a resultant field in the center of all this. And that's the important one, the free plasma in the center. And that ties in on every level with the Keshe technology. It ties into inside of ourselves, that we can access the free plasma state inside of ourselves, which is a resultant of these other fields and so on. So I don't know if I correctly answered that question, but sometimes I get going on this stuff. And does that help at all, or could I go on something else there?
Thank you for talking about that subject. There's a lot there to ponder. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's hard to just launch into instant answers because of the aspect of the Keshe technology, where a lot of the words are not defined the same as in science. For example, the word plasma in the Keshe technology, plasma is not just your room temperature, room pressure plasma, or the plasma of lightning, or the plasma of the sun, or even just the plasma of the 99.98% of the universe that the scientists say is plasma already. It's more than that. It's the plasma that is inside of every item. Everything has plasma inside of it. We are composed of plasma. These things are composed of plasma. All the stuff is composed of plasma. When you look at the beyond the nano level, down to the atomic or the molecular level, the atomic level, and start to, if we were to look inside this desk in the atomic level, basically there's a particle, we would see what looks to be a particle way the heck over there and way the heck over there, and it's a bunch of space in between. Well, that space is where the plasmatic fields can interact and move, and where there's nowhere in the universe where these plasma fields do not exist. As Mr. Keshe has pointed out, even anywhere in the universe that you choose to go to has at least one hydrogen atom in every cubic meter. More often, there's quite a few atoms per cubic meter. But the point is, in that vacuum condition, that one atom of hydrogens, the field of that one atom can extend out a cubic meter, okay? Because there's no other interference. The fields in a vacuum of any, what looks to be a particle, but there's no particles in the Keshe teaching. It's all magnetic gravitational fields. That's what that electron and proton are. When it comes right down to it, is simply concentrated fields. So if we look at it on that level, it all becomes fields and plasma and interaction of positive positioning due to the interaction of fields. There's no more matter level, there's no more even visual, it's just an interaction of fields. So in a sense, everything is plasma. And we can learn to think and even visualize in that realm. And we start to actually see everything, including world events and other things, can be interpreted according to the way the universe works with fields. Because outside of Earth, there is the rest of the universe, and there are sort of universal laws of the way things are positioned, the way things work, that we're trying to still figure out, but are a long, long, long ways away from it. Current science is pretty confused and confusing when it comes right down to it. I mean, they've already admitted that half the weight of the universe they can't see or measure in any way at this point, and so on and so forth. So it's a confusing realm in a way.
So I then have a question regarding what kind of got me interested in Keshe to begin with, regarding plasma. And besides getting on to nuances of first order, second order phase transitions and what plasma are and all that type of jargon, the first thing that really interested me in Keshe's stuff, where I'm still questioning about, are the talks of the reactor that he's talked about. I believe he has a patent or so on. There was a couple countries.
Pardon me, has a what?
A patent on one. It's the counter-rotating electrode in concentric rings that have different inert gases inside. So we have different layers of hydrogen, helium, argon, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Counter-rotating electrodes, and there's supposed to be a force that's imparted on the impeller-expeller mechanism, and there's supposed to be a coefficient of performance greater than 1 gain. And I saw that there was a video of a continuous live stream of a laboratory in Italy that has one of these reactors running, supposedly, and I've not been able to gain more information about that. So I'm more or less interested in those technologies in regard to Keshe. I understand that the GANS is really interesting how that's coming out. Yet the fundamental one that came to me was the power generation and anti-gravitational effects that were talked about in this counter-rotating electrode device of inversions of different inert gases. And I would love to gain more information about how those experiments are going, and specifically if you have any more information about that experiment in Italy, where they actually have a legitimate lab setup, it looks like, with the proper analytical equipment.
Yes, well, that was a couple of years ago in Italy when we were hot to trot on those kind of reactors up to 3 and 4 years ago now. That's why I started my Keshe plasma reactor group about 4 years ago now to invite people in, because that was what I was creating with my different spinning reactors and so on. I've got a high vacuum system back there, and all the tubing and different, got a vacuum chamber, and I've done other experiments and so on. And that's what we got into for a period of time. And Mr. Keshe, before that, was his main thing, was creating these reactors in various configurations. And some of the work he did in Iran, for example, and with their equipment, and created these rotating chambers that had special effects with anti-gravity, for example, and creating excess energy. So basically, he established for himself that this was possible to do, and brought that knowledge back with him. And he's been more or less teasing it with us since, and set up the lab in Italy, and actually showed, he did with the other knowledge seekers at that time, setting up measurements of the magnetic fields generated by this reactor combination, which was a 4-reactor basic tetrahedral combination, as well as other reactors set up around it to attenuate the fields and cause this give and take sort of thing to happen. And they were measuring the magnetic fields, and at one point the magnetic field went to 129 Tesla, which is unheard of for laboratory environments. And
129 Tesla?
Pardon me?
129 Teslas?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that's in one of the videos that's, I'm not sure if it's on the Keshe Foundation YouTube. It's on my channel right now, which is Mr. Fix-It Rick. You'll find some of the videos as well from various experiments. So there are videos of that high Tesla magnetic field experiments. They were on live stream until we lost our live stream channel last year. It was taken down. Go ahead.
Getting into, if he wanted to learn more about that, would he come to your reactor
I've looked at those
things? Or, I mean, what would, if you wanted to get into some of the...
I looked at those videos, and I'm more or less now interested of these effects that have been occurring over the past 10 years or so. There have been claims that Mr. Keshe has made of releasing this technology to certain, if not all, countries. And with what they're saying, these results that were had, I'm just interested in how those are now being shown to these high-level organizations and where that process is, such as the Magrav.
Yeah, for example, there was just a conference in let me get it up here actually, because it illustrates exactly the answer to several questions, which is Let me just get it. I can do a screen share if I can find the document here. It's not in where it should be. Let's just get it here. Here we are. Okay, so let me do a screen share. I think you'll be able to see it on your video there. So this was a conference in Ghana. It was just held 10 days ago. And it was with the Ghana Atomic Commission and the Ghana Spaceship Institute, which is the part of the Keshe Foundation Ghana and so on. And they co-sponsored, so the Keshe Foundation with the Ghana Atomic Commission co-sponsored this workshop conference for 3 days in Ghana. It's called the New Dawn, Africa's Meteoric Rise in Spaceship Technology Conference. And so in this, they describe the Keshe technologies that are being used. Here's an image of the 4-reactor combination showing the free plasma in the center of this configuration. That's the Starship. This is showing a control unit for the basic Starship configuration. Here's another iteration of that, and so on. So there's this whole conference in Ghana, and the one of the people in this Ghana what do you call it, the Atomic Commission, is very much interested in the Keshe technology and fully supports it, and has been doing his own experiments and so on and so forth, and getting other people interested in workshops. And they're doing these incredible workshops on the grassroots level. And Ghana may end up being one of the top spaceship institutes in the world, because they're there on the ground floor, basically, of this grassroots movement. And they don't have the overhead of NASA and other organizations, the mental overhead of worrying about whether they're going to disturb somebody's job because they might, lose their job in the petrochemical industry or the spaceship fuel industry or something because of this technology. They're not worried about that at all. They're going full speed ahead. They see the benefits. They know where this is going, and they're smart people, and they can take it from grassroots to functional apparatus very quickly.
Agreed. And so all that on that, have they been able to, with that, like you're saying, these kind of rotating electrodes and these tetrahedron shapes, have they measured an actual effect of the anti-gravitational effect on a balance at all, a scale, any?
Yeah, well, in the case of the videos that were put out a couple of years ago, when we were, like I say, hot to trot on this idea, we were creating these reactors. In Italy, there's also videos showing a weight reduction of the unit. There's like a 2.2 kilogram or something like that, a reduction in weight, and they also had an increase in weight when the polarity switched on the unit. Then you actually get an increase in weight, and so on. So they were able to demonstrate that at that time as well. Once that was demonstrated, basically a bunch of things went down. Mr. Keshe's life got threatened and so on, and a lot of that got disassembled and put on the back burner, while other things went on to the front burner with the health, agriculture, power, and so on became more relevant, because the way it works is this technology, as Mr. Keshe says, it's like a Pandora's box. Once you open it, then it all starts to become available. And we can't have the space technology become available immediately without introducing other factors that enable it to be supported, you might say. it's a bit too powerful and radical for humans. That's why we had to have a very strong push for world peace, and still have that. It's always been at the core ethos of the Keshe Foundation, but it's especially being pushed right now in order to bring in this so-called anti-gravity. Mr. Keshe doesn't call it anti-gravity. He says there's no anti about it. It's positive positioning. So you're using another gravitational force, a magnetic gravitational force, and it produces a positive positioning. There's no anti or cutting out gravity necessarily. It's a different viewpoint of that. But you could say anti-gravity. That technology must have global peace in order to be implemented. Otherwise, there's too much of an imbalance, and the powers that be won't allow that imbalance to take place. They'll cause wars, they'll cause havoc in order to shut it down. But gradually, those that wish for war and wish for havoc on the planet are being suppressed and revealed, and there's a movement happening on the planet to bring all this out and to basically enable the peaceful functioning to occur. And then you'll see this technology come on so fast and so quickly. All the parts are being assembled now, right down to, you see Elon Musk of the Tesla car company and the autopilot that he's come up with for his cars, so that each car now that's being built has full automatic driving capability built into it. In other words, not just for cruising on the highway, you take your hands off the wheel, which all the Tesla cars have had in the last while. But the new ones have full automatic driving from your yard to wherever you're going. It can be dialed in and so on. That's the first stage to going three-dimensional instead of two-dimensional, traveling on roads and so on. Now,
may I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. This demonstration that you're talking about in Italy, both of you guys, you said 2.5 kilograms. Is that what it was?
It was a couple of kilograms on it was around a 20% or something reduction. I think it was at that time.
Okay. Just curious, and this demo included, along with the other potential demos around weight reduction, has there been ways in which the demos were carried out that took the fluid, that pulled a vacuum on the spheres, rotating them again to rule out gyroscopic forces, etc.? I mean, how are could you describe some of the demonstration processes and the ways in which the demos elucidated on the effect of the transport mechanisms inside of the complex gas composition versus
extra strength
gyroscopic forces?
Yeah, just a second. I'll find the playlist on that, perhaps. I think that's it here. No, it didn't. Just a second.
You want to? Oh.
Okay, I've got it here now. Here's a playlist with 7 video. Well, it's got a few videos with some of the breakthroughs of the Keshe Foundation, and perhaps that'll help. Put it into the chat here.
Are these available online? Because we could do our fact checking afterwards. If you
yes, this is exactly what I'm doing here. This is the playlist that I have on my YouTube, and it's got the Spaceship Institute live October 21st, 2014, showing the weight reduction, part 1 and part 2 and part 3 of that. there's a breakthrough, the 129 Tesla from the lab, October 26, 2014. There's the full raw unedited version, and there's a short version of that, and a promo video there as well with some other background information. So that's what's available in that playlist in particular. Now, Mr. Keshe did his research on his particular iteration of these reactors, and then in this case, it was not the high vacuum reactors that were being shown. These were the GANS reactors made out of plain copper, machined out of copper, round spheres that Armin put together. And so it's a different a case, but a similar, it's all the same field interaction that's being worked with Mr. Keshe and the Keshe Foundation. And
Have these been demonstrated with just air inside?
With just air. Some reactors, yeah, they've been experimented with air and rotation of the, because the idea is that the inside of the reactors are nano-coated. They have, the idea being that the rotation of a nano-coated copper sphere is in itself enough to create fields. And if it's
however, the rotation of a sphere can also produce gyroscopic forces, which, if a force is acted upon it, could provide, demonstrate a loss of weight.
Yeah, possibly, but not on a like it won't show. It will if it's speeding up or slowing down, but at a constant motion, you won't have like loss of weight or anti-gravity necessarily. With four systems going, then, and you're weighing the total system rather than each individual one, I don't think the gyroscopic would be in effect in that case.
So haven't been demonstrated with air inside of them, and then right next to the backfilled complex gas composition that is the either GANS and gases or other compositions that have been used inside of these reactors. Just curious, the level of discernment and demonstration between different fluids inside of these reactors, what happens when you take the fluid out as much as possible, and to what effect, indifference of effect does that have when rotating?
Mr. Keshe talked about this quite a bit, and initially when the first reactors were expounded about that he had with the gases inside, like you mentioned, and so on. And for those types of reactors using the gases, especially if they're working with the way he was with the using some radioactive gas in order to initiate the reaction and so on to get this thing fired up, essentially. It was very important not to have any gases inside that didn't belong there. In other words, oxygen and other things that larger molecules or atoms might interfere with the ability of the free movement of the gases inside that you wanted to be in there. In other words, basically contaminants of your environment will kill the plasma is what it comes down to. The same thing as if the walls of your reactor are not nano-coated properly, it won't repel the plasma. Instead, it'll basically dissipate it and kill the entire field buildup that could occur inside. So yeah, it's very sensitive. It's very specific to specific reactors. But as you have to realize that, as Mr. Keshe has said, and I've printed out and put on my wall, is that there's as many reactor types as there are stars in the universe. So when you start talking about reactors, you have to get quite specific to any particular reactor type. And there's many types, like we're talking about. There's ones with gases inside, one with liquids, ones with liquids and gases, and with plasma and plasma water, and with nothing inside, and with electrodes in the middle, and not electrodes, and spinning electrodes, and balls within balls within balls, and it goes on and on and on.
Yep,
And
and we don't have to go through all of the reactor types. I'm talking about just the fact that a body is rotating and gyroscopic forces are inherent with that process. And to what degree has the delineation been made between the apparent effect of loss of mass or weight and the gyroscopic forces being subtracted from that of a reactor that does not have the more complex. Yeah, let's talk about the ones with the fluids in them, for instance, the gases. So take the gases out, rip a vacuum on it, rotate it again. What effect is that? I'm just curious if you know of those demos being made and where we can find them, but it seems like you have a YouTube video, YouTube channel that could possibly point us in the right direction of knowing what demos have been made, what the claims are, and then maybe we can follow up from there. I appreciate you.
Sure, have a look there first and see what you think about the lab setup and so on. I don't know. I haven't seen any definitive videos showing a weight loss due to the gyroscopic effect, an actual scale and a gyroscope going on it and showing a weight loss. I don't know if that's true or not. Or do you know if that's true?
Are you asking me if I know that there is
you know of any videos or that show
weight loss effect by rotating metal spheres?
Yeah. Did you know of any weight loss videos of due to gyroscopic effect?
I have seen a lot of data on an apparent weight loss effect by rotating certain objects of different materials. Absolutely.
Right, but they're usually under controlled condition of certain type of material over a certain kind of plate and so on and so forth. And
that may be the same for all
reactors. 2 or 3%
material in a certain condition, etc. And so, yes, to answer your question, I have. And so that's why I'm asking you that question, because that seems to be really important to understand the difference between what the certain types of demos are providing as far as data and demo, and providing a really comprehensive demonstration to the viewers that some of these other phenomenons related to gyroscopic effects isn't the sole culprit for what they're seeing.
Yeah, well, the Keshe technology is basically nothing to do with the gyroscopic effects, and the effects of the reactors are often different effects than the weight loss and so on. That's just part of the effects of what you feel and what you experience in the presence of these rotating reactors.
One more thing, I just want to make sure that I'm clear about what you just said. The Keshe reactors have nothing to do with gyroscopic effects.
To my knowledge, that seems to be true. I don't know if we actually measured gyroscopic effects or taken them into account even with the experiments.
Okay.
It's something to consider in terms of a rotating sphere does have effects on it in terms of gyroscopic effects. There's, especially you put one sphere inside of another sphere, and they're all rotating in liquid, then it's basically like a gyroscope inside a gyroscope inside a gyroscope in a way. So they're all free to rotate in whatever direction that they need to at the time. Yeah, so there's lots of interesting effects to look at besides the gyroscopic effect, and so that's one of the probably the bottom of the list for most of the research that gets done.
Okay. This is Andrew again. Now that thank you everybody for those questions there on the gyroscopic effects. I was just like you're saying, one of the primary things that got me into the Keshe Foundation was looking at these counter-rotating reactors and seeing what they do. So now that you answered the question of what happened to these reactors when it came down to Keshe's life was threatened, and he reduced the amount of research he was putting into those counter-rotating reactors and the effects he was getting due to government or other people threatening.
Part of it, let me explain that a little better, because what happens is, yeah, it's like you say, but it also is, the way it works is Keshe delivers the basic information, theories, ideas, and inspiration and so on. And then it's up to us to do the work. It's not up to him to do the work. It's up to the knowledge seekers around him to take that and run with it. And then when we get stuck, well, this doesn't work, what do? We ask and we get more information to get to the next level, to the next step. So it's up to whatever research laboratories that feel like this is a lucrative or other, that it's worthwhile to get into this technology, which very few of them will touch it to start with. It's too out there for most research labs. And if they do touch it, they won't tell anybody about it because it's too lucrative for them. And that's the problem with most scientific organizations. They're not geared up to give the information to the public. They're geared up to keep the information for themselves. And that's part of the problem that with the Keshe Foundation, it's all out in the open, more or less. Each of the Knowledge Seekers Workshop, we bring the latest technology, the latest ideas there. Now, there are groups, as Mr. Keshe said, there's probably 10 groups around the world that are working on the so-called anti-gravity or lift technology, the positive positioning technology, now, right at this period of time. And that's not at the Keshe Foundation in Italy, but just around the world, and various individuals and groups that are doing this. And Keshe is in touch with them, gives them, the hints and clues and so on. But that's not necessarily right out there in the public, because some of that experimenting you have to do it in private enough to accumulate the data, and then you have something to show at some point. I'm that way myself. I do hundreds of failed experiments with my sound things. This doesn't work, that doesn't work, this doesn't work. And then finally I try to show something that sort of works, at least for my workshops that are live. At least it gets some effect, and so on. So there's a lot of stuff going on underneath. For example, the Keshe has been in touch with the military and government organizations around the world, and all those that accept the Keshe philosophy for peace, then they get they are able to entertain some sort of relationship with Mr. Keshe to get more information and to be able to work with this technology. The GANA is a good example, where people from the GANA military were at the conference and actually participated and so on. Right. So this is the way it's going, is that it's multidimensional. It's not just on an individual basis, not just on group basis, but the Keshe organization tries to work with anyone who is willing to work with the ethos of the Keshe Foundation, which is, fairly strict in a way, because it means you can't use your knowledge to make weapons and hurt others. Right. And since that's where most of the technology seems to go, that's not acceptable to most, or in the process to make profits. That's the other big rush. And the Keshe Foundation doesn't endorse using the technology just for the purpose of forwarding greed in the world. It's not meant for that. It's quite the opposite. Right. And it's made to empower people on a personal level, so we don't need to have any greed anymore. There won't be the desires to have your neighbor's stuff, because you've already got your own stuff from all this technology. We can make what we need. We can make everything, essentially everything, including food, new materials, health, space, everything.
So then, Rick, I got a question on that. Well, on that subject, the materials. Looking at the unit you have behind you, the official Magrav system, and the way those are coming out. Specifically, what now going back into the GANS technology after hearing about the positive positioning technology we just talked about, going back into how GANS and how this community has been evolving and continuing with these experiments, with that product of the actual official product from the Keshe Foundation, have been somewhat. I've not been able to find a lot of information other than what we were talking about of you plug this device into your house, and then supposedly there's supposed to be this nano-coating that extends throughout the house wiring system, and you can reduce your power by 90%. However, I've not been able to see any clear demonstrations of this effect occurring where it grows on a copper wire that has not been treated with GANS and it continues to grow on it, or I've not been able to see any demonstration that technology being used on a resistive load and measuring the power in, power out, and being able to show a definite answer of if this is, for instance, a type of crystal power cell similar to John Hutchison's technology or anything like this that is tapping into the 0-point energy fluctuations, Casimir forces, etc. I've not been able to see anything that really proves that it is, for the power generation side of it, anything more than a galvanic power. Now, for biological effects, there are a lot of effects that do show positive effects that are, quite remarkable. But on the power aspect,
well, there's quite a few videos available, actually, of different experiments people are doing, as well as lots of testimonials of people have, claimed their power bill decreases and so on. It's and there's other tests that have been done putting two Magravs together in this. It's called infinity loop between them, where they're both communicating in a push-pull kind of relationship, and it ends up in there's several cases that I know that people have tried that, and it ends up in up to 90% or even more decrease in the power usage, according to the meters that are used on the input and output on the unit. Some of that information is a little scattered, because what happens is this group over here will do a video and put that on their YouTube channel. This group over here will do a video, and so on and so forth. And it's not always instantly accessible. A lot of the Keshe information is not necessarily instantly accessible, and it's somewhat deliberately that way. It's made to make you dig a little deeper, and we're not much into instant answers. Mr. Keshe isn't much into instant answers. He gives instant answers in a way, but it takes time to learn about this technology and the terminology that's used, the concepts that are used, and so on. They go pretty deep, and it does take time, and it's hard because there's such a massive amount of information. Just in one workshop, there's a massive amount of information, and sometimes sometimes there's only 5 or 10 minutes of that that's really critical for oneself to get. But somebody else might have another 5 or 10 minutes, different section of that same video that's critical for them. Someone else, a different part that they'll get out of it, because it occurs at multi-levels at the same time.
So then if I'm specifically then, because I have to get going soon, unfortunately. I've been enjoying this talk. This is really nice to have a community gathering about this. Appreciate that. I'm interested in what is the amount of time, let's say, that these units can operate before they need to be serviced. Do you think there is an estimation of a 5-year service life, 10-year service life? Is there any estimation or degradation in the amount of power that is being recycled or reused?
At this point, it doesn't look like there's a problem with the longevity as far as that goes. The nano-coating, as long as the nano-coating is proper to start with on these coils and so on, and the whole thing works efficiently and it doesn't have short circuits inside and so on, which can occur if the nano-coating isn't correct, then basically it should be good forever. But the thing is the grid good forever? Not likely. We'll probably do away with the grid as far as that kind of power supply within, I guess, 10 years at maximum. And definitely within a few years, we'll have self-contained. Everyone will have their own self-contained power supply, which is the only way to go. And this technology is actually already obsolete. This plug into your energy savings it's obsolete, because now they already have the self-contained units that are self-powered, self-generating, don't need to be plugged in. They only have an out plug, not an in and out plug. So
what is the longest lasting power generation technology that's been recorded, and is that data available to the public? Not only in the power generation side of things, being a standalone power generator, but also the technology that you were just touching, giving a savings on grid power. What is the longest lasting, so that we can also try and understand for ourselves how long some of these may last in the future?
what do you mean by longest lasting? You mean like this unit, will it degrade or over time? Is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah, sometimes when groups put out technologies and provide them to the public, there are durability tests that say X device has been running for 50,000 hours and is still going strong, with minimal or no or lots of degradation, etc. Is that type of...
Usually for these units, if they work initially, then they'll continue to work. And if they don't work initially, then leave it for a while and it could kick in and work properly after that. Because what happens is, in the nano-coating, for example, I've got a coil here. Here's a nano-coated coil. Okay, this is a copper coil, completely black all over, right? Okay, this coating is such that if I had electricity going through this coil, I could hang on to it and it wouldn't shock me, because this is an insulating layer. In fact, it's about 30,000 or more layers of nano-coating to make that insulating layer. But it also allows the plasma flow within the whole unit and so on. So, sorry, what was the question again? There, I got a little distracted.
Is your power savings device plugged in?
Is it plug-in? Sorry.
Yeah. Are you using it for your house?
Yeah, well, I use it to. I had it plugged in earlier, but it's not plugged in now because I was doing some experiments. Or actually, it is plugged in now, but I don't have anything plugged into it. I was doing some experiments without the stuff plugged into it. Yeah, I normally have this plugged into my refrigerator, because they've determined the refrigerator circuit can act as again, this loop, this infinity loop. It can have sort of a symbiotic relationship with your refrigerator. And they've actually created a refrigerator circuit with 2 refrigerators and a Magrav unit, and caused that Magrav unit to be a self-sufficient Magrav. That was what was taken to Washington, D.C. By our friend Douglas about, 2 months ago or something like that, and to be demonstrated in Washington, D.C. as the first self-standing Magrav power unit.
Have you recorded power savings with your device?
Sorry, say that again.
Have you recorded power savings with your device?
No, because I can't get my power bill is on a meter I get from my landlord, and even though I showed a big savings for the last bill, I can't really say that it was due to the Magrav, because it's the summertime and I don't have my heaters on as much and so on. I don't have a good objective way of measuring that. I've got a watt meter that's hooked up to the unit now, but it's hard to tell with the watt meter itself because the unit actually works through your whole household system rather than just the meter at the end. They've had trouble measuring the system properly with just a meter. Sometimes the plasma flow goes back toward the whole electrical grid, sort of backwards. So it's sometimes hard to measure and may not even make it through certain meters and so on, depending.
Rick, thank you for talking. It was nice talking to you, and good luck and take care.
You too. Thank you very much.
I had a quick question about the nano-coating traveling through your household and or through your car, coating everything that's in circuit with it and creating an insulating layer. Isn't that going to mess with any type of switch?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. I mean, it's a strange idea when you think about it. For example, when they make these Magrav coils in the factory, they do a heat process. This is a different caustic process to get this one. They use heat with a torch, and it'll cause the same black nano-coating process. And so you're starting off basically with burnt wiring. How crazy is that, right? If you're an electrician and you see black copper, you automatically go, whoop, throw it away. And that's what your job is, to pull out all the burnt, black-looking copper wire and put in the fresh-looking, shiny copper wire. That's what it's all about in household wiring. But this is particular kind of nano-coating that even though the burnt wire has a nano-coating on it, but if you use a burnt wire extension cord because you've already overloaded it, it's not going to work efficiently. But if you have a nano-coated extension cord and you have certain other devices that work well with the nano-coated plasmatic environment, then you actually have a more efficient system. So, for example, these coils here, they're connected in a certain way. There's coils inside of each of these two coils that you see. So there's actually 4 coils here, and they're all touching each other and so on. But yet, if you take the inlet and outlet, it'll show 0 ohms. It'll show no resistance or high resistance. Sorry, not 0 ohms. It'll show infinite ohms. It'll show high resistance between the two in and outs of it, even though the wires are actually touching in terms of the nano coating. So when it coats the wiring of your home, you may not see it all turn black like this, but it still could have several layers of nano coating, copper nano coating. Essentially, wiring already has a nano coating because anything that's shiny copper immediately starts to form an oxide coating on it, even though you can't see it. It'll look shiny for days, weeks, or months, and finally it'll start getting duller and duller. And eventually it could start turning green or other colors, like on the roof of your home and so on. Copper, shingles or copper roofing. So basically, it could create this nano coating in your wiring, and you not even see it. However, there are people that create Magrav devices. Lee Coates is one. He showed it in my Reactor group 2 nights ago, last night actually, on how he estimates the plasma energy from his coils. Is he'll hook up a wire to one of his systems, and that wire will start to turn black inside the wire, actually inside the insulation of the wire. Okay, so it's a bit hard to believe. I have a sample somewhere here. I just can't find it right now. But what happens is, if you have an insulated wire with the plastic insulation around, especially if it's a multi-strand, you can hook it up to these systems and actually watch on a daily basis how fast that wire starts to nanocoat. In fact, Lee was he was telling me, setting up a 12-foot wire between his units So he's got like a couple of dozen units, and he's testing each unit to see how quickly it nano-coats that wire. And you can get a foot or two of nano-coating on a daily basis on these wires. So this black coating will travel through this wire, and you can literally see it on a daily basis. So this just proves that there is a plasma process occurring with this system. If you hook up a wire to any of your electronic components, I can guarantee it won't start turning black. That's just doesn't happen. So there's definitely something special being exuded from these Magrav devices, from these various devices, and you can actually tell whether it's working or not according to how quickly it coats the wire. It's more or less an objective test.
Thank you, Rick. I didn't doubt that there was a nano-coating process occurring. My question was about how the insulative layer of the nano-coating would affect switches.
Right. Okay. Thank you for bringing me back to the actual question. Okay, in the case of switches, yes, there's something to be said about that. It would depend on whether the contacts of the switch itself were silver contacts or are they just copper contacts. Is the wiring attached to a metal screw that's a stainless screw on a copper plate, and so on and so forth. I run into the same problem of how do I connect with these nano-coated coils and still have a proper plasmatic connection without breaking the nano-coating and actually connecting with the copper itself underneath the nano-coating. It's a difficult situation. So in the case of your house wiring, I think what happens is the fields are enough to bypass switches and so on and just carry on with the plasmatic coating process. The plasma really wants to go back to the source where this energy, it feels that it's coming from. In other words, it wants to go back to the generator, back to the wherever the power from the grid is coming from. It'll tend to want to go backwards to the flow of electricity in a way. This is what's found often traditionally in the science of plasma as well. Electrons and the plasma flow are in different directions. The electron fields and the plasma flow are in different directions.
So you're saying I'm mostly concerned about, fine electronics in the car. I have 1 million switches in my car.
Okay, good point. Yeah.
Different types, it's like from the window lifter to the heat control,
Yeah, computer would be a big.
So are you saying that if I put the unit right next to the battery, that I mostly would be dealing with nano-coating towards the battery, or is that for the entire car?
Right. Well, for example, people have taken the battery and just put spiral nano-coated coils, one clockwise rotating, one counterclockwise rotating, on the battery terminals. Just putting 2 nano-coated coils, it's really hard for me to believe that would make any difference whatsoever. But knowing what I do with the plasma technology, yes, it can make a difference. It creates a field structure around the vehicle, around the engine, and so on, and can actually change. People have had amazing testimonial results from it. It's hard to clarify exactly, to get objective results, although there are fuel mileage recordings and so on. One woman with a diesel did that and had an amazing increase in her mileage on her diesel vehicle and so on. And another person put this on a battery on a solar-powered electric fence that she has out in her land. She doesn't have any regular grid power. She put it on this battery, part of the solar, and her solar system works way better now than it did before. So in the case of a car, you do have switches, you do have different things, but I don't think it's a concern in this nano-coating because the plasma, for whatever reason, seems to tend to, it is intelligent in its own way, and that it tends to work in a way that that works with things rather than against things. I don't know of any reports of people putting like Magrav units in their car and it's causing a disruption to their car, causing it not to function, or any switches or electronics not to work properly. The biggest problem would be if you had some miswiring problem and there was a short circuit and, you know, you could fry some wiring that way or something. But I don't think there's an issue with the switches. For example, there's been no reports of any problems with house switches or any of the nano-coating process being interfering with the regular grid power or anything like that.
All right, thanks very much, Rick. Much appreciated.
But if you do try it and you have any problems, do let us know. This is, you know, it's something that often we just have to try it ourselves. And, you know, it's a big risk. You got a $40,000 vehicle with a $3,000 computer, and if it messes up your computer, and you know, you got to plug in a new one, and maybe it won't work again after that. There is that risk factor, but most of us that get involved with this or get so excited that we're willing to sacrifice our cars and so on. I haven't actually put my car under full Magrav and plasma orientation yet, but I am planning on doing that. I've taken minor steps and so on, but I want to go full plasmatic. In fact, I'd like to take an older vehicle like my older 58 Chevy truck and turn it into a full plasma test bed, actually, with everything I could possibly imagine and installed on it as a feature, and see if I could get an old 350 Chevy engine to actually perform on a plasma level. So that's a challenge that I'd like to take up, but I don't have a lot of free time for that kind of activity these days, so it's kind of difficult to get my own little funky experiments done here, let alone a bigger project. Anyway.
Thank you, Rick. My name is Tanasi. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of this. And one of the questions I had for you is, how long have you been working with the Keshe Foundation and on this technology?
Well, I've been involved with the Keshe Foundation for probably 5 or 6 years now. And I first got involved by just transcribing some of the videos that Mr. Keshe did and getting the English words uploaded and so on. And then I got involved with doing this Keshe Reactor group. And then Mr. Keshe liked that and started the Knowledge Seekers workshops. And then I've hosted the workshops from day one there.
So has your involvement been mostly in the video and presentation of it, or have you been in the, do you have a technical background and you've been working with the development of?
Yeah, I started the Keshe Plasma Reactor group because I started the first rotating ping pong ball and rotating other things. I've taken a ping pong ball and put it under high vacuum, essentially vacuumed all the air out of the inside, and I determined that it would not collapse, and I was able to spin it under high vacuum and able to create an actual plasma inside a ping pong ball that got to light up with a purple glow from just like a plasma ball by putting high voltage in it and this kind of thing. I rotated a plasma ball in a vacuum chamber to see what would happen to it, and did a bunch of crazy kind of funky experiments to start with in my plasma reactor group. And that sort of got the ball rolling for many other people. They thought, well, geez, I can do that too. And we'd help each other. And some of us were working with the gases, the neon and argon and helium and so on. And others were just experimenting with rotating GANS balls and all these different kinds of rotating structures. That's part of what I've done for a long time, even before the Keshe Foundation. I've got a lot of YouTube videos on my Mr. Fix-It Rick channel that have to do with rotating things. So that's been a big thing for me from day one.
Okay, thank you. And so the Magrav technology that been describing a lot during this presentation, when was the first one of those that you made that was successful, that had a benefit?
Well, successful is relative in this business. Each experiment is just to see what happens, basically, and see if we can crack this magic formula for creating effects out of it and whatnot. So part of the newer way of doing these rotating things is a less emphasis on the gases and the hydrogen and helium at the core of the reactor and so on, and instead creating these GANSes and GANS water and that kind of thing. So go ahead, sorry.
In Magrav, there's no rotating gases from what I've seen though, correct? It's just a solid state item that has several coils that are nano-coated, that are sometimes connected by capacitors. There are also some sort of a nano-coated capacitor.
Yes.
And so my question with that, when was the first time that you hooked that up to your household circuitry?
It's probably about a year ago or something like that that I received this unit. And of course, I've been doing other experiments with coils and magnets and GANSes and other things around the lab as well. So all of that has an influence or did a part of it.
And when you hooked it up, you noticed personally that it creeped through your house, so to say, and created nano-coating on the wiring through your whole house?
No, I can't say that. I haven't seen any evidence of nano-coating of the wiring of my house and that kind of thing. So I can't say for sure, no.
Okay, and in that year, when Garrett asked you the question before he left, you said that in the last month you weren't able to tell any improvement, but in the whole last year you were not able to definitively notice any improvement either?
No, I wouldn't say so. It's my power bills are so variable and dependent on what heaters are on and all the gear in the lab and that kind of stuff that's going on that I can't say. I haven't actually tried to. Hasn't been part of my my emphasis really to try to prove the Magrav unit itself. It's I've got enough testimonials and enough evidence that I've seen that I'm convinced it works, and I'm convinced that it works on a different process than just the measuring of it. To me, for example, the Chinese have called this the happy box, and they call it the happy box because it makes people feel better in the room where it's used in. And to me, that is so much more superior to this little bit of, saving $10 a month or whatever the hell it is on your power bill. This whole focus on power bill usage and so on, to me, is it represents the greed of man more than anything else. Is I want my power unit, I want my free energy, I want my power bill to be less, so I have to pay less money to the greedy corporations or whatever it is.
I thought that was the foundation of the Keshe Foundation, that people would eventually be having localized power that they're creating. I'm sorry if I misunderstood that.
Yes, that is definitely part of it. But it's not meant for the greed of mankind. It's meant to alleviate the suffering of mankind. And, a lot of people that want that 10% savings or whatever, if they're focused on that, then they're focused on their greed. They're not focused on the well-being of their fellow mankind. They're focused on their personal well-being. And it's me, me, me. That doesn't work very well with the Keshe technology. It's us, it's not me. And we're all in this together, and we're all helping each other get out of the messes that we're in together. And that's part of the learning process with the Keshe technology. Nothing is cast in stone. This unit, like I say, it's already obsolete, but it will probably be still produced for months into the future. Whether we'll come up with a cost-effective generator, self-standing generator unit. I mean, they're available now for sale at the Keshe Foundation website. There's a 90-day wait for the production of it, and whether it's fully functioning and working properly remains to be seen. There's a lot of variables that could take place. There's just an earthquake that had happened in Italy today, for example, that could alter things extremely in that area for production and so on. Mr. Keshe, in the last earthquake, made the entire Keshe factory that makes these Magravs available to the government to use the GANS, to use any of the nanomaterials, to anything in the lab or anything in their production factory was made available basically for the earthquake victims and so on. They took GANS to the situation, and they took the information and knowledge and so on to try to get to those people that were involved in that. So, you know, things change very, very rapidly in this whole situation. And a lot of it is put right back on us to do the actual work to create stuff, to make things. So there's various people that are working on these self-standing generator systems and have amazing results. I've just gotten a video in I haven't even looked at that combines two of these Magravs in Togo, in Africa, and they've gotten a 90% reduction in the energy from that. So, you know, there's just so many different things coming in. It's you have to really be in the main vein of all this information coming and going to get the latest you know, stuff on it that way. And it's a little hard because there's no regular channel. Well, there are some channels like the Golden Age of GANS is a Facebook channel that has a lot of info. It comes and goes through there. People post all their latest and so on. We have the testimonial site at the Keshe Foundation website. We've got the personal blueprint section where people show the replications of the blueprints. We've got the blueprints themselves and so on. All of these different areas are available, different links and so on. And there's...
Rick, excuse me, I have one more question, and Cary's indicating that we need to wrap this up pretty soon. And that question came to me last night after Cary's presentation. If in the law of conservation of matter, energy and matter, if we are bringing, or if you are bringing in energy from another dimension or some other aspect, are we then increasing our matter as well here on Earth? And if this is used as a type of global source of energy, as a local point energy source, is that going to be bringing a tremendous amount of matter so that the actual mass of Earth will be increasing greater than it already is?
No, I don't think there's any matter that's being produced other than the fields, the magnetic gravitational fields, the plasmatic fields can be used to create new matter. That's where matter comes from, actually, is the creation from fields. For example, we've got planet Earth here. We've got carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen are all created and available in our atmosphere. And it's due to our position from the sun and so on. It doesn't happen on Venus the same way or as Mars the same way. We happen to be in the sweet zone where these things are created from the fields. So you could say that you know, the mass of the Earth is increasing due to the field interaction, which creates new elements and so on. But there's actually not that much mass is actually increased because of the transformation of the materials and so on. So the idea in the Keshe technology is we can learn to create new materials from the interaction of fields, but it's not like it's going to increase the density or weight of the earth in a significant way, is the way I understand it. I mean, in the sense, trees do the same thing. They increase their mass out of the air and the ground. You know, a tree could weigh several tons and actually levitates itself over the surface of the earth several tons over the period of its lifetime, 100 years or whatever.
And
so
in that case, there's a very clear transaction of energy from the sun into matter, right? And that maintains that balance of energy and matter.
Yeah, so with the Keshe technology, the energy that's extracted actually comes from the source energy, which is the plasma that is at the core or center or fundamental beginning of virtually everything. So the idea is to get back to that source energy and extract from that, because then there's a gradient that we can work with. And that's the whole idea of that free plasma in between those four the pyramid shape with the four orbs in it that we saw earlier. And that's the glowing part is the free plasma, the center of gravity of that pyramid.
Okay.
And that's where the energy comes from. It's plasmatic energy, and then because it's on that level, it needs to be transformed or essentially step down so that we can use it, because it might be too intense of energy directly or not able to perceive it directly.
Rick, thank you so much for taking your time. I know how hard you work and the hours that you keep, so taking your time to answer all our questions is really a special treat. Really
no problem.
And this is Jerry. He owns this hot springs resort that we're at, and has wants to say something.
Okay, great.
Rick, thank you so much for taking the time and being with us this afternoon. It was powerful. One last thought is, it sounds to me that there's a bit of holding back of information and knowledge, and a waiting period for us to really do the experimentation and develop the data and help to really move this forward, when there's an appearance that Keshe is really holding back information until we are ready. That's kind of a feeling that I have. On the other hand, we really are at the 11th hour and 59th minute, and really in need for really receiving as much knowledge and information that we can really move this technology forward towards health and healing, towards agriculture and agronomy, towards all the different technologies. And if there is a withholding of information until...
Well, there isn't. That's the whole thing. You've got over 1,000 hours of information now. How many more thousands of hours do you need to start?
We're all starting. We're all starting from where
exactly. This is a new technology. It's a new science, and we have to start on the ground floor. And Keshe is there immediately to give us the information we need. If you were doing experiments right now, or have been in the last 5 years, then you would be in the middle of a process that you need to know something. And if you were to ask Keshe, he would be there immediately with the answer for you in a workshop. And bingo, you would have that information you need to be able to go to the next step. Because information is only good to get you to the next step. It is no good to have an overload of information. That's what I have discovered. That's what I deal with every day, is the overload of information. I know way too much, and I've got way too much stuff in my lab, and that's what I've been doing the last days, is packing up stuff in boxes, getting it out of here so I can get clear to get to the next step in my teaching and my environment here. And this is part of the Keshe process, is to try to get clear on where we are and get to and understand where we are in order to get to that next step. And it's a hard concept in a way, because we want the answer right now. We want to, give me that Magrav that works so I can just plug it in and everything works properly. And we've gotten to that point with the Magrav, but we haven't gotten to the point with some of the other technology. We don't have the lift technology for your car yet, for example. But all of this is in process. It's all steeping. It's all working on different levels. And we are going as fast as we can. And we have to go with world events at the same time, because it's so important for this world peace agreement with all the governments of the planet before we can fully implement this technology. And Mr. Keshe is ready for more information. In fact, the more information is already available, but it's just that it's slow without that total.
Hey, Rick, we need to move out of this room, but I just want to say thank you so much. This is Cary, and I just want to say there's a really bright community of people here, which is so awesome to be in Ashland, Oregon. And it feels, like resistance, but I know that there's a reason we came here, to maybe just activate people to become more interested in participating. And Whitney and I both know it's a global community that's bringing this work forward, and it's an interface between us and Mr. Keshe. And so we're just grateful to be here, and we're grateful for everybody that came, and think this was really productive today. So just thank you so much for taking the time with us, and we'll just end it now and go on, because there's a yoga class ready to take over in this room.
Yes, okay, yep, we got to have the next biker conference come in or whatever, yep. Just like to say that thank you to everybody, and yes, there are challenges with this, learning this technology and this knowledge, but on the other hand, the payoffs are so incredibly great.
They are. We wouldn't be here doing this and traveling the country if we knew that.
Right, you recognize it directly, so thank you.
Much love, many blessings, my brother, and many blessings to everybody out there in our listening audience. Breathe, smile, love, and pay attention, and be part of the emerging humanity on planet Earth, operating in peace, love, and plenty for all. Adios.
Right.
Thank you.